The morning sun filtered through the curtains of the small apartment as Olivia Johnson opened her eyes. At 16, she had the same morning routine every day. Help her mother prepare breakfast, get ready for school, and practice piano for at least 30 minutes before leaving. The old keyboard sitting in the corner of their living room had been her faithful companion for years. Some keys stuck occasionally, and the sound quality wasn't great, but to Olivia, it was a treasure. Her mother, Maria, was already in the kitchen making coffee. The aroma filled their modest two-bedroom apartment, which they had called home since Olivia was 7. "Morning, Mom," Olivia said, giving her mother a quick hug. "Good morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep well?" Maria asked, her tired eyes crinkling at the corners as she smiled. Despite working long hours as a housekeeper for one of the wealthiest families in the city, Maria always managed to maintain her warmth and kindness. "Yeah, I had that dream again," Olivia replied, pouring herself a glass of orange juice. "The one where I'm playing at a concert hall." Maria's eyes softened. "One day, baby. One day that won't just be a dream." Olivia nodded, though both of them knew the challenges that stood between her and that dream. Private music lessons, applications to music schools, competition fees. These were luxuries they simply couldn't afford on Maria's salary. After breakfast, Olivia sat at her keyboard. Her fingers moved across the keys with a grace that seemed impossible for someone who had never taken a formal lesson. She played a piece by Mozart that she had learned by watching videos online, closing her eyes and imagining the sound of a real grand piano beneath her fingertips. Maria watched from the doorway, her heart swelling with pride and aching with the knowledge that her daughter's talent deserved more than what they could provide. "That was beautiful," Maria said when Olivia finished, "but we need to get going. The Wilsons are having that big charity event tonight, and Mrs. Wilson wants me there early to help with preparations." Olivia quickly gathered her school things. "Do you need me to come help after school?" "That would be great, honey. Mrs. Wilson said it was fine. Just come to the service entrance around 4. The Wilson estate sat on 5 acres of manicured grounds in the most exclusive neighborhood in the city. Richard Wilson had made his billions in tech, creating software that revolutionized the banking industry. His wife, Eleanor, was known for her charity work and lavish parties that brought together the city's elite. Maria had worked for the Wilsons for nearly 10 years, managing their household with quiet efficiency. The job paid well compared to other housekeeping positions, and the Wilsons were generally fair employers if somewhat distant. After school, Olivia made her way to the Wilson estate. She had been coming here with her mother since she was a child, first just sitting quietly doing homework while her mother worked, and later helping with small tasks when needed. The staff knew her well and greeted her warmly as she entered through the service door. "Your mom's in the main hall," said Rosa, one of the kitchen staff. "They're rearranging things for tonight's event." Olivia thanked her and made her way through the winding hallways of the mansion. She knew the layout by heart, having spent countless hours exploring when she was younger. The main hall was at the center of the house, a grand space with high ceilings and marble floors that echoed with every footstep. As she approached, Olivia heard her mother's voice giving instructions to someone. She paused at the entrance, taking in the scene. Workers were setting up chairs and small tables around the edges of the room. A stage had been erected at one end, where a grand piano gleamed under the light of the crystal chandelier. That piano had been Olivia's fascination for years. It was a Steinway Model D concert grand, worth more than what her mother earned in several years. Mr. Wilson rarely played it. It was more of a showpiece than an instrument in this house. Occasionally, for special events, they hired professional pianists to perform. Olivia stood transfixed, staring at the piano from across the room. Its polished surface seemed to call to her like it always did. "Olivia!" Her mother's voice snapped her out of her trance. "Come help me with these flower arrangements, please." For the next few hours, Olivia helped her mother and the other staff prepare for the evening's event. The Wilsons were hosting a fundraiser for music education in public schools, ironically enough. The guest list included wealthy donors, local politicians, and even a few notable musicians. As the staff finished their preparations, Mrs. Wilson came to inspect everything. She was a tall, elegant woman in her 50s, with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of privilege. "Maria, everything looks wonderful," she said, scanning the room with a critical eye. "The caterers will be here at 6 and guests start arriving at 7. Mr. Wilson wants everything to be perfect. Yes, ma'am, Maria replied. We've double-checked everything on your list. Mrs. Wilson nodded, then noticed Olivia arranging flowers on one of the tables. Your daughter has grown so much. How old is she now? 16, Maria answered with a proud smile. She's doing very well in school. Top of her class in most subjects. That's wonderful, Mrs. Wilson said, though her attention was already shifting elsewhere. Make sure the staff knows to use the good crystal for the wine. After Mrs. Wilson left, Olivia continued working alongside her mother. When they had a moment alone, Olivia whispered, Mom, do you think anyone would notice if I just touched the piano? Not even play it, just touch it? Maria glanced nervously at the instrument. Olivia, you know that's not a good idea. Mr. Wilson is very particular about his things. I know, but Olivia sighed. It's just so beautiful. Maria squeezed her daughter's hand. Maybe someday, but not today, okay? Olivia nodded reluctantly. This wasn't the first time they'd had this conversation. The piano represented everything that was out of reach, opportunities that were reserved for people with money and connections, not for the daughter of a housekeeper. At home that evening, after Maria had gone back to the Wilson estate to help with the event, Olivia sat at her keyboard again. She closed her eyes and tried to recall the exact appearance of the Steinway, imagining how the keys would feel under her fingers, how different the sound would be from her worn-out keyboard. She played a piece by Chopin, one she had been teaching herself for months. Her fingers danced across the keys with natural talent that defied her lack of formal training. Music had always made sense to Olivia in a way that nothing else did. Notes and rhythms spoke to her, telling stories and expressing emotions that words couldn't capture. When Maria returned home late that night, she found Olivia asleep at the keyboard, her head resting on her arms. Gently, she woke her daughter and guided her to bed. How was the party? Olivia asked sleepily. It was fine, Maria said, helping Olivia into bed. They raised a lot of money for music programs. That's good, Olivia murmured. Maria hesitated, then added, the pianist they hired canceled at the last minute. They had to play recorded music instead. Olivia's eyes opened wider at this. Really, what happened? Car trouble, apparently. Mr. Wilson was quite upset. He had been promoting the performance to his guests. What did they do? They managed. These things happen at events. Maria tucked the blanket around her daughter. Get some sleep now. It's late. But Olivia lay awake long after her mother left the room, thinking about the empty piano at the Wilson estate. In another world, in another life, she might have been the one playing at that fundraiser, sharing her music with people who could appreciate it. The next morning, Olivia woke up to find a small package on the kitchen table with her name on it. What's this? She asked her mother, who was already dressed for work. Open it, Maria said, a mysterious smile on her face. Inside the package was a USB drive. Olivia looked questioningly at her mother. It's full of piano tutorials, Maria explained. Advanced ones. I asked the music teacher at your school for recommendations. I know it's not the same as real lessons, but I thought it might help. Olivia hugged her mother tightly. Thank you, Mom, it's perfect. That afternoon, while Maria was at work, Olivia immersed herself in the tutorials. She practiced for hours, losing track of time as she worked through new techniques and pieces that challenged her abilities. What neither Olivia nor Maria knew was that their lives were about to change. In just a few weeks, the Wilsons would be hosting another event, one where circumstances would finally bring Olivia's hidden talent into the light, forcing Richard Wilson to see beyond his prejudices and recognize the extraordinary gift that had been right under his nose all along. But for now, Olivia continued to play on her second-hand keyboard, dreaming of the day when she might touch the keys of a real concert grand piano and share her music with the world. 3 weeks passed quickly. Olivia continued her daily routine of school, practice, and occasionally helping her mother at the Wilson estate. The USB drive with piano tutorials had become her most prized possession, and she spent every spare moment working through the lessons. Mom, listen to this, Olivia said one evening, beckoning her mother to the keyboard. Maria sat down on their worn couch, smiling tiredly after a long day of work. Olivia's fingers flew across the keys as she played a complex piece by Liszt that she had been practicing all week. When she finished, Maria clapped her hands. That was amazing, sweetheart. I don't know how you learn these pieces so quickly. Olivia shrugged, but her eyes shone with pride. It just makes sense to me. Like I can see the patterns and feel where the music wants to go. She hesitated before adding, Mrs. Peterson at school says I should consider applying for music scholarships next year. Maria's smile faltered slightly. That would be wonderful, but those applications often require formal training background or recommendations from recognized teachers. I know, Olivia sighed. It's just a thought. Maria squeezed her daughter's shoulder. We'll figure something out. Your talent deserves to be recognized. The next day, Maria came home with news. The Wilsons are hosting another event this weekend, she told Olivia. It's Mr. Wilson's birthday celebration. Very exclusive, only about 50 guests. Do you need me to help again? Olivia asked, already knowing the answer. Extra events meant extra pay for her mother, which they could always use. If you don't mind. Mrs. Wilson specifically asked if you could assist with serving. They're short-staffed. Maria hesitated. There's something else. They've hired a famous pianist to perform, Gabriel Chen. He's played with orchestras all over the world. Olivia's eyes widened. Really? Gabriel Chen is coming to the Wilson house? You know who he is? Maria asked, surprised. Mom, he's amazing. I've watched all his performances on YouTube. His interpretation of Rachmaninoff is incredible. Olivia could barely contain her excitement. I won't even mind serving drinks if it means I get to hear him play. Saturday arrived and the Wilson estate was transformed for the birthday celebration. Florists had filled the house with arrangements of exotic flowers, and caterers bustled about preparing elaborate dishes. Olivia helped with setting up, all while stealing glances at the grand piano that had been moved to the center of the main hall. As evening approached, Olivia and the other staff changed into the simple black and white uniforms required for serving. Mrs. Wilson gathered them for final instructions. Remember, this is a very important night for Mr. Wilson. Many of his business associates and friends will be here. I expect perfect service. Her eyes scanned the group, lingering briefly on Olivia. Some of you are young, but I expect professional behavior from everyone. As guests began to arrive, Olivia moved through the crowd with a tray of champagne flutes. She recognized some faces from news articles and magazines, CEOs, politicians, and a few celebrities. They barely noticed her as they took drinks from her tray, too engaged in their conversations about stock markets, property investments, and upcoming elections. Richard Wilson stood near the entrance, greeting each guest with practiced charm. He was a tall man in his 60s with silver hair and the confident posture of someone used to being in charge. Despite having seen him many times over the years, Olivia had rarely heard him speak directly to her or her mother. The evening progressed smoothly. Dinner was served in the dining hall, and afterward guests migrated back to the main hall for the entertainment portion of the night. Olivia positioned herself near a corner where she could watch and listen, while remaining unobtrusive. Mrs. Wilson clinked a spoon against her glass to get everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming to celebrate Richard's birthday. For tonight's entertainment, we are honored to have the renowned pianist Gabriel Chen perform for us. Applause filled the room as a young Asian man in a tailored suit approached the piano. He bowed slightly to the audience before taking his seat. As his fingers touched the keys, the room fell silent. Olivia stood transfixed as Gabriel Chen played. His first piece was a Beethoven sonata, performed with technical precision and emotional depth that made her heart ache. She watched his hands, studying his technique, the way he used his body, the subtle expressions that crossed his face as he played particularly moving passages. During a brief intermission, Olivia continued her serving duties, but her mind remained with the music. As she offered canapes to a group of guests, she overheard a conversation. Chen is certainly skilled, but I find his interpretation a bit too conventional, said a woman in an expensive-looking dress. I disagree, replied her companion. His phrasing in the Beethoven was quite innovative. Did you notice how he handled the development section? Olivia had noticed, and she had her own thoughts about it, but she kept her expression neutral as she moved on to the next group of guests. When she reached the far end of the room, she heard a commotion. Gabriel Chen was speaking with Mrs. Wilson, and neither looked happy. I'm terribly sorry, Mrs. Wilson, but I simply cannot continue, he was saying, his voice strained. The pain in my wrist is too severe. I fear I might cause permanent damage if I play the second half. But you can't just leave, Mrs. Wilson protested. We have a contract. I understand, and I'll return your deposit, of course. But my doctor has warned me about this recurring tendinitis. I pushed myself too hard preparing for tonight. Richard Wilson joined the conversation, his face darkening. Eleanor, what's the problem? Mrs. Wilson explained the situation in hushed tones. Mr. Wilson's birthday celebration was about to lose its main entertainment. He glanced around the room, noting the expectant faces of his guests. Can't you just play something simple? A few short pieces? He pressed. Gabriel Chen shook his head apologetically. Even that would be unwise in my condition. I truly am sorry. After a few more minutes of tense conversation, the Wilsons reluctantly accepted the situation. Gabriel Chen made a brief apology to the assembled guests and left, cradling his right arm. Richard Wilson attempted to smooth over the awkward moment. Well, friends, it seems we've lost our entertainment for the evening. Perhaps we should move on to the cake. But the guests were clearly disappointed. Many had come specifically to hear the famous pianist perform. The atmosphere in the room grew uncomfortable as people murmured among themselves. Olivia, who had been watching from nearby, felt a sudden crazy impulse. Before she could think better of it, she approached her mother, who was helping to clear empty glasses. Mom, she whispered urgently. I could play. Maria's eyes widened in alarm. Olivia, no. That's not a good idea. But I know most of the pieces he was going to play. I've practiced them. Honey, these people are expecting a professional, Maria said gently, and Mr. Wilson would never. What are you two whispering about? Mrs. Wilson had approached without them noticing. Her tone wasn't unkind, but there was clear tension in her voice given the evening's unexpected turn. Nothing, ma'am, Maria said quickly. We're just discussing the cleanup rotation. Mrs. Wilson nodded distractedly, but as she turned to leave, Olivia spoke up. Mrs. Wilson, I could play the piano. If you need someone. Both Mrs. Wilson and Maria stared at her in shock. You play? Mrs. Wilson asked, her tone somewhere between surprise and disbelief. Yes, ma'am. I've been playing for years. Mrs. Wilson glanced at Maria, who nodded reluctantly. She's very good, Maria admitted. Self-taught, but she has a gift. Mrs. Wilson seemed skeptical but desperate. Richard, she called, gesturing for her husband to join them. When he approached, she explained Olivia's offer. Richard Wilson looked Olivia up and down, taking in her serving uniform and young age. He had seen her around the house for years but had never really noticed her. You're Maria's daughter, he said, as if just realizing it. And you play piano? Yes, sir, Olivia replied, meeting his gaze steadily despite her racing heart. He seemed to consider for a moment, looking back at his restless guests. Then he shrugged. Well, we don't have many options. It might amuse everyone to have a little unexpected entertainment. The word amuse stung, but Olivia held her tongue. Go ahead then, he said, gesturing toward the piano. Play something. Anything to fill the awkward gap before we bring out the cake. As Olivia moved toward the piano, she heard him mutter to his wife. At least it will be a story to tell. The help's daughter filling in for Gabriel Chen. Maria watched with a mixture of pride and apprehension as her daughter approached the grand piano. The room quieted as guests noticed the young girl in a server's uniform sitting down at the instrument. Some exchanged confused glances while others smiled condescendingly, clearly expecting some simple tune or beginner's piece. Olivia took a deep breath as her fingers hovered above the keys of the magnificent Steinway. This was the moment she had dreamed of for years, her first time touching a real concert grand piano. Despite the less-than-ideal circumstances, she felt a surge of determination. She would show them all what she could do. As she began to play the opening notes of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor, a hush fell over the room. The same piece Gabriel Chen had been scheduled to perform next. The first notes Olivia played hung in the air like a question. She could sense the surprise rippling through the room, surprise that her fingers moved with confidence, that she had chosen such a difficult piece. The magnificent Steinway responded to her touch in a way her old keyboard never could, each note ringing clear and true. For the first few measures, she was acutely aware of the eyes on her, the curious stares, the raised eyebrows, Mr. Wilson's skeptical gaze. Then, as the music began to flow through her, the world around her faded away. There was only Olivia and the piano, speaking to each other in a language more profound than words. The Chopin ballad was a challenging piece that told a story through its notes, beginning gently, building to moments of intense passion, then falling back to reflection. Olivia had practiced it countless times on her old keyboard, but playing it on this piano was like finally speaking in her true voice after years of whispering. As she reached the more technically demanding passages, her fingers flew across the keys with precision that belied her lack of formal training. The room had fallen completely silent. Even the servers had stopped their work to listen. Maria stood frozen near the wall, tears forming in her eyes as she watched her daughter shine. All the late nights practicing, all the sacrifices they had made, this moment made everything worth it. But there was fear too, fear of what might come after. The Wilsons' world was not their world, and moments of crossing over rarely ended well. Richard Wilson's expression had transformed from mild amusement to utter disbelief. He had expected a simple tune, perhaps something learned from a beginner's book, not this masterful interpretation of one of the most challenging pieces in the piano repertoire. He looked at his wife, who appeared equally stunned, then back to the young girl at his piano. "Who is she again?" he whispered to Eleanor. "Maria's daughter." Eleanor replied, unable to take her eyes off Olivia. "She's been coming here for years. And she plays like this? Without lessons?" His tone held a note of incredulity. "Apparently so." As Olivia moved into the final section of the piece, she put her whole heart into the music. The emotional climax resonated through the hall, touching something deep in everyone present. When she played the final notes, there was a moment of profound silence, the kind that follows only truly moving performances. Then the applause began. Hesitant at first, then building to enthusiastic acclaim. Several guests rose to their feet. Olivia blinked, coming back to reality as if from a dream. She looked up to see stunned faces all around her. An older woman in an elegant blue dress approached the piano. "My dear, that was extraordinary. Are you studying at a conservatory?" Before Olivia could answer, another guest joined them. "Remarkable technique. Who is your teacher?" Olivia's cheeks flushed. "I don't have a teacher, ma'am. I taught myself." This statement caused another wave of murmurs through the crowd. A self-taught pianist playing at this level was almost unheard of. Richard Wilson made his way to the piano, his expression unreadable. The room quieted as he approached Olivia, who stood up respectfully. "That was unexpected," he said, studying her with new interest. "Do you know anything else?" Olivia nodded. "Yes, sir. I know quite a few pieces." "Play another," he said. It wasn't exactly a request, but it wasn't the dismissive tone he had used earlier either. Olivia sat back down and, after a moment's thought, began to play Bach's Prelude in C major from the well-tempered clavier. The piece's mathematical precision and clear structure showcased a different aspect of her abilities. She followed it with a movement from a Mozart sonata, her interpretation bringing out the playfulness hidden in the composer's precise notations. A man who had been introduced earlier as the conductor of the City Symphony approached, listening intently. When Olivia finished the Mozart piece, he asked, "Young lady, how long have you been playing?" "Since I was 6, Olivia replied. "About 10 years now. And no formal instruction at all?" "No, sir. Just videos online and books from the library. And listening, lots of listening." The conductor shook his head in amazement. "You have a rare gift. With proper training." He didn't finish the thought, but his meaning was clear. Guests began to crowd around the piano, asking questions, making comments, some even offering business cards and suggestions for teachers or programs. Olivia felt overwhelmed by the sudden attention. Across the room, Maria watched with mixed emotions. Pride in her daughter's talent and the recognition it was receiving warred with concern about what all this might mean. She had always known Olivia was special, had always hoped for opportunities for her. But now that they seemed to be appearing, she felt unprepared. One of the kitchen staff touched her arm. "Maria, they want more champagne served." The reminder of her position, even on this extraordinary night, brought her back to reality. As the evening continued, Olivia played several more pieces at the guests' requests. Word had spread throughout the party that something remarkable was happening, and people who had stepped out into the garden or other rooms returned to hear the young pianist. During a brief pause while Olivia rested her hands, Richard Wilson approached her again. This time his wife and several other guests were with him. "Olivia, isn't it?" he asked, his tone different now, respectful, curious. Yes, Mr. Wilson. Tell me, how is it that you've been coming to my house for years, and I never knew you could play like this? Olivia met his gaze steadily. No one ever asks her. Something flickered in his eyes. Perhaps recognition of his own assumptions or maybe embarrassment. Well, I'm asking now. Where did this talent come from? Does your mother play? No, sir. Mom works too hard to have time for hobbies. There was no accusation in her voice, just a simple statement of fact. But she's always supported my playing. Bought me my keyboard even when we couldn't really afford it. Eleanor Wilson glanced across the room toward Maria, who was efficiently directing the service staff while trying to keep an eye on her daughter. For perhaps the first time, she seemed to really see the woman who had kept her household running smoothly for a decade. The conductor, who had been listening to this exchange, spoke up. Mr. Wilson, this young woman has extraordinary potential. With the right guidance, she could have a significant career. Is that so? Wilson looked thoughtful. And what would that entail? Proper instruction for starters. A better instrument for practice. Eventually, auditions for music schools. The conductor turned to Olivia. Would you be interested in that path? Olivia's heart raced. Yes, sir. More than anything, but... She hesitated, thinking of the costs involved, costs she knew her mother couldn't manage. Richard Wilson seemed to read her thoughts. The expense would be considerable, I imagine. For a talent of this caliber, there are scholarships, the conductor said. But yes, there would still be significant costs. Transportation, proper attire for performances, application fees, summer programs. Wilson nodded slowly, then said something that surprised everyone, including himself. Perhaps we could help with that. Eleanor Wilson raised her eyebrows but didn't contradict her husband. Several of the guests nodded approvingly. Richard, said a woman Olivia recognized as the head of a local arts foundation, if you're considering supporting this young artist, my organization could match your contribution. We're always looking for exceptional talent to nurture. Another guest, the CEO of a major corporation, joined in. Count me in as well. This is exactly the kind of opportunity our community foundation aims to support. Olivia looked from one face to another, scarcely believing what she was hearing. Just hours ago, she had been serving these people drinks, invisible to them. Now they were discussing her future, offering help she had never dared to hope for. She sought out her mother's eyes across the room. Maria had heard enough of the conversation to understand what was happening. She gave Olivia a small nod, her eyes shining with unshed tears. As the discussion continued around her, Olivia was asked to play once more. She chose an improvisational piece she had composed herself, letting her fingers express all the emotions swirling inside her: hope, disbelief, gratitude, and a touch of caution. The original composition surprised the listeners even more than her earlier performances. It was modern yet accessible, showing not just technical skill but creative vision. When she finished, Richard Wilson looked at her with newfound respect. You wrote that yourself? Yes, sir. I compose a little. When I can. The conductor was shaking his head again. Remarkable. Simply remarkable. As the evening drew to a close, plans were already being made. The conductor offered to connect Olivia with a renowned piano teacher, who occasionally took on scholarship students. The Arts Foundation director wanted to arrange an audition for a young artists program. Even Mr. Wilson, who had initially seen Olivia as merely entertainment to fill an awkward gap, was fully invested in the discussions about her future. Before leaving the piano, Olivia played one final piece, a gentle nocturne that seemed to float in the air like a dream. As the last notes faded, she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was her mother. It's time to go home, sweetheart, Maria said softly. You've had quite a night. Indeed she had. As they walked toward the service exit, their usual route, Richard Wilson called after them. Maria, Olivia, use the front door, please. And I'd like to speak with both of you in my office tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Mother and daughter exchanged glances, uncertain what this meant, but sensing that everything had changed. They left through the main entrance, stepping out into the cool night air, the stars above them seeming to shine with new possibility. Olivia barely slept that night. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of the party guests, heard their applause, felt the perfect weight of the Steinway's keys beneath her fingers. Beside her, Maria tossed and turned as well, her mind racing with questions about what the morning would bring. At breakfast, They sat across from each other at their small kitchen table, both uncharacteristically quiet. "Mom," Olivia finally said, breaking the silence. "What do you think Mr. Wilson wants to talk about?" Maria cupped her coffee mug with both hands. "I'm not sure, honey. But whatever it is, we need to be careful." "What do you mean?" Maria chose her words carefully. "People like the Wilsons. They live in a different world from us. When those worlds touch, it's not always simple. But they seemed genuine last night. Everyone was so excited about my playing." "I know." Maria reached across the table to squeeze her daughter's hand. "And I'm so proud of you. Just keep your feet on the ground, okay? Don't get swept away." They arrived at the Wilson estate at 9:45, earlier than requested. The house looked different in the morning light, somehow less intimidating after the events of the previous night. The staff greeted them with curious glances. Word had spread quickly about Olivia's performance. Rosa from the kitchen gave Olivia a warm hug. "Everyone's talking about you, girl. Who knew we had a piano star working right alongside us?" Olivia smiled shyly. "I just love to play." "Well, you sure showed them all," Rosa said with a wink. "About time someone did." At precisely 10 o'clock, they were shown into Richard Wilson's office, a room Olivia had glimpsed only a few times when helping her mother clean. It was impressive, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather furniture, and large windows overlooking the garden. Family photos lined one wall, showing the Wilsons at various events and vacations around the world. Richard Wilson sat behind a massive desk, reviewing some papers. He looked up when they entered, his expression unreadable. Eleanor Wilson stood near the window, elegant as always in a simple but expensive-looking outfit. "Good morning," Richard said, gesturing to the chairs opposite his desk. "Please sit down." Maria and Olivia perched on the edge of their seats, both feeling out of place in this room where important business decisions were made daily. "I want to talk about last night," Richard began, setting aside his papers. "Olivia, your performance was extraordinary. I've heard many pianists over the years, professionals with decades of training who couldn't play with the emotion and technical skill you displayed." "Thank you, sir," Olivia said quietly. Richard leaned forward, resting his arms on his desk. "I must admit I'm embarrassed. You've been coming to this house since you were a child, and I never once thought to ask about your interests or abilities. That was short-sighted of me." The admission seemed to cost him something. Richard Wilson wasn't a man accustomed to acknowledging his oversights. Eleanor spoke up from her position by the window. "What my husband is trying to say is that we were both moved by your talent, Olivia, and we'd like to help you develop it." Maria straightened in her chair. "That's very generous, but please let me finish," Eleanor said, not unkindly. She moved to sit beside her husband. "After you left last night, we had several conversations with our guests. Thomas Reed, the symphony conductor, was particularly insistent that your daughter's talent shouldn't go to waste." Richard nodded. "He called me again this morning, in fact. He's arranged for you to meet with Patricia Lee." Olivia gasped. Patricia Lee was one of the most renowned piano teachers in the country, known for training prodigies who went on to international careers. "She rarely takes new students," Richard continued. "But Reed sent her video some guests took of your performance last night. She's agreed to evaluate you." That's amazing," Olivia stammered, her heart racing. "But her studio is downtown and the fees would be covered," Eleanor finished for her, "along with transportation costs and a proper piano for your home. That keyboard you've been using is completely inadequate." Maria's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, while we appreciate your interest, Olivia is my daughter. Any decisions about her future need to involve me." A flash of surprise crossed Richard's face, as if he hadn't considered that Maria might have reservations about their offer. Eleanor, more perceptive, nodded. "Of course, Maria, we wouldn't dream of overstepping. But surely you want Olivia to have this opportunity." "More than anything," Maria said firmly. "But I need to understand what's being offered, and what's expected in return." Richard looked uncomfortable at the directness of the question. "Nothing is expected in return. This isn't a transaction." "Everything in life is a transaction in some way, Mr. Wilson," Maria said quietly. "I've worked for wealthy families for 20 years. I've seen how these situations can go." An awkward silence fell over the room. Olivia looked between her mother and the Wilsons, feeling the tension. Finally, Eleanor spoke. "Maria, your concern is understandable. Perhaps we've approached this badly." She glanced at her husband before continuing. The truth is, we were both moved by Olivia's talent, and we recognize that we have the resources to help her in ways that would otherwise be difficult. But you're right to question our motives. Richard cleared his throat. Last night made me realize some uncomfortable truths about myself. I've prided myself on supporting the arts, on funding programs for talented youth. Yet I completely missed the extraordinary gift right under my roof. He looked directly at Maria. I'm not offering help to ease my conscience. I'm offering because it's the right thing to do. Maria held his gaze, measuring his sincerity. And what exactly are you offering? Eleanor answered. Lessons with Patricia Lee, a proper piano. Transportation to and from the studio. Later, if things progress as Thomas believes they will. Support for applications to music schools and competitions. And if I accept this help for my daughter, what changes between us? Do I continue working here? Do you see me differently? Richard looked genuinely surprised by the question. Of course you continue working here if that's what you want. Your employment has nothing to do with this, doesn't it? Maria asked softly. Yesterday, Olivia was serving drinks to your guests. Today, you're inviting us into your office and offering to change her life. Things have already changed. Eleanor exchanged a look with her husband. Perhaps they needed to, she said simply. The conversation continued for another hour. The Wilsons outlined their proposal in detail. The financial support would come partly from them and partly from a foundation they controlled, ensuring it would continue regardless of any changes in their personal relationship with the Johnsons. Maria asked tough questions about commitments and expectations, making it clear that while she was grateful for the opportunity, she wouldn't allow her daughter to be treated as a charity case or a novelty. Throughout the discussion, Olivia remained mostly quiet, watching the adults negotiate her future. She felt both excited and overwhelmed. Just 24 hours ago, she had been practicing on her old keyboard, dreaming of someday touching a real piano. Now they were discussing lessons with one of the country's top teachers, competitions, even the possibility of music school in a few years. As the meeting concluded, Richard made one final point. There's something else we should discuss. The guests last night, many of them shared videos of Olivia's performance on social media. They've been getting attention. He turned his tablet around to show them. On the screen was a video titled Billionaire's Maid's Daughter Stuns Party Guests with Incredible Piano Performance. It already had over 50,000 views. Olivia's eyes widened. That's me? The internet works quickly, Eleanor said. Several news outlets have reached out asking for interviews. Maria's expression grew concerned. I don't know if that's a good idea. We agree, Richard said, surprising them both. Olivia's talent should speak for itself, not become some viral sensation about class differences or a rags-to-riches story. We've declined the interviews for now, but you should be aware that there's interest. We've also asked our guests to respect your privacy, Eleanor added, though not all of them will listen. As they prepared to leave, Richard stood and extended his hand first to Maria, then to Olivia. I'd like to hear you play again sometime when it's not a performance. Just for the joy of the music. Olivia nodded, a small smile forming. I'd like that too, sir. Outside in the hallway, Maria took a deep breath. Well, that was unexpected. Are we going to accept their help, Mom? Olivia asked, her voice a mix of hope and uncertainty. I think we are, Maria replied after a moment, but on our terms, not just theirs. She put an arm around her daughter's shoulders. Your talent opened this door, Olivia, but we'll walk through it together, with our heads held high. They left through the front entrance again, a small but significant change from their usual routine. As they walked down the long driveway, Maria's phone rang. 'Twas a number she didn't recognize. Hello? She answered cautiously. Is this Maria Johnson? Asked a friendly female voice. This is Patricia Lee. I understand I might be teaching your daughter soon. I've seen the videos, and I must say I'm very intrigued by her natural abilities. Could we arrange a meeting this week? Maria looked at Olivia, whose eyes were shining with hope and possibility. Yes, she said firmly. We'd like that very much. When she hung up, Olivia was practically bouncing with excitement. Was that really Patricia Lee? What did she say? Maria shared the details of the conversation as they continued walking. The world seemed different somehow. The same streets they'd walked hundreds of times before now felt full of new potential. Mom, Olivia said suddenly, are you worried about all this? About things changing? Maria considered the question carefully. Yes, she admitted. Change is always a little scary, even good change. But I'm more proud than worried. You've worked so hard with so little. Now you'll get to see what you can do with the right resources. What if I disappoint everyone? What if last night was just luck? Maria stopped walking and turned to face her daughter. Olivia, listen to me. What you did last night wasn't luck. It was talent and dedication shining through despite all the obstacles. And no matter what happens next, whether you become a famous pianist or decide music is just something you love to do for yourself, you could never, ever disappoint me. Olivia hugged her mother tightly right there on the sidewalk. Over her daughter's shoulder, Maria looked back at the Wilson estate on the hill above them. For 10 years she had climbed that hill every day, invisible to the people who lived there. Now, because of her daughter's gift, those same people were seeing them both clearly for the first time. It was a beginning, not an ending. There would be challenges ahead, adjustments to make, boundaries to establish. But for now, they allowed themselves to feel the simple joy of possibility. 3 years passed in what felt like both an instant and a lifetime. Olivia sat in a small room backstage at Carnegie Hall, her fingers moving silently over her knees as she mentally rehearsed her performance one last time. The black concert dress she wore had been carefully chosen for this evening, elegant but not flashy, allowing the music to remain the focus. A gentle knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting the stage manager. Instead, her mother entered, looking beautiful in a deep purple dress that Olivia had helped her pick out for the occasion. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" Maria asked, coming to sit beside her daughter. "Nervous, excited, grateful." Olivia took a deep breath. "A little bit of everything." Maria smiled, reaching out to adjust a strand of Olivia's hair. "I remember when you used to play on that old keyboard in our apartment. You'd close your eyes just like you're doing now, totally lost in the music." "Some things don't change," Olivia said, returning the smile. "But a lot of things do." Indeed, their lives had transformed dramatically since that night at the Wilson estate. The day after the party, a baby grand piano had been delivered to their apartment, which proved to be too small to accommodate it. Within weeks, they had moved to a more spacious 2-bedroom unit in a better neighborhood, with a living room large enough for the piano. The lessons with Patricia Lee had begun immediately and proved to be both the hardest and most rewarding experience of Olivia's life. The renowned teacher was demanding and exacting, but also deeply committed to nurturing Olivia's natural talent. "You have gifts that cannot be taught," Patricia had told her after their first session. "But there is much I can teach you to enhance those gifts." For the first year, Olivia practiced 4 hours every day after school. In the second year, she began participating in competitions, winning several prestigious awards. Videos of her performances garnered attention online, but Maria carefully managed her daughter's growing profile, turning down most interview requests and ensuring that Olivia's education and well-being remained the priority. Richard and Eleanor Wilson had kept their word, providing financial support through their foundation without attempting to control Olivia's development. Richard, in particular, had undergone something of a transformation. The experience had opened his eyes to his own blindness about talent and potential in unexpected places. He had expanded his foundation's focus to identify and support gifted young artists from disadvantaged backgrounds. Mrs. Wilson called earlier, Maria said now, checking the time on her phone. "They're stuck in traffic but promised they'll be here before you go on stage." Olivia nodded. Her relationship with the Wilsons had evolved into something neither family could have predicted. Not quite friendship. The differences in their lives and experiences were too great for that, but a genuine mutual respect that transcended their original employer-employee dynamic. Maria still worked for the Wilsons, but her role had changed. She had been promoted to household manager, overseeing all the staff and operations of the estate with a substantial increase in salary and benefits. The Wilsons had come to value her organizational skills and direct approach, while Maria appreciated being recognized for abilities that went beyond cleaning and serving. Another knock on the door, firmer this time. The stage manager peeked in. 15 minutes, Miss Johnson." "Thank you," Olivia replied, her heart beating faster. When the door closed again, Maria took her daughter's hands. "Are you ready?" "I think so." Olivia squeezed her mother's hands. "I just wish Dad could have been here." A shadow of old grief passed across Maria's face. Olivia's father had died when she was just 4 years old, leaving Maria to raise their daughter alone. He would have been so proud, Olivia. So incredibly proud. "I'm going to play the Debussy for him," Olivia said softly. "It was his favorite, right? You always said he loved that piece." "He did." Maria's eyes glistened with tears she wouldn't let fall, not wanting to upset Olivia before her performance. "He used to say it sounded like light dancing on water." They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, each lost in their own thoughts. The journey to this night had not been easy. There had been setbacks and difficulties alongside the triumphs. Some of Patricia's other students had resented Olivia's rapid progress and the attention she received. A few parents had made cutting remarks about her background, or suggested that she was receiving special treatment because of her story, rather than her talent. One competition judge had been openly skeptical about her self-taught beginnings, implying that she must have had secret training to play at her level. Each challenge had only strengthened Olivia's determination. "Let my playing answer their questions," she had told her mother after one particularly hurtful incident. And it had. Her technique continued to improve under Patricia's guidance, but it was the emotional depth of her playing that moved audiences most profoundly. Critics noted her unusual ability to find new dimensions in familiar pieces, bringing fresh perspectives to works that had been performed countless times before. Tonight's concert was both a culmination and a beginning. At 19, Olivia had been invited to perform as part of a young artist showcase at Carnegie Hall, a dream she had barely dared to imagine 3 years ago. In the fall, she would begin her studies at Juilliard, having been awarded a full scholarship. "I should go find my seat," Maria said, glancing at the time again. "The Wilsons reserved a box, and Patricia will be sitting with us." Olivia stood and embraced her mother tightly. "I love you, Mom. Thank you for everything, for working so hard, for believing in me, for being strong enough to accept help when it was offered." Maria held her daughter close. "I love you too, more than anything in this world." She pulled back to look Olivia in the eyes. "Now go show them all what you can do." After Maria left, Olivia returned to the piano in the small practice room for one final moment of preparation. As her fingers touched the keys, she thought about the path that had brought her here. She remembered the first time she had seen a piano up close, as a little girl accompanying her mother to work at the Wilson estate. She remembered teaching herself to play on that second-hand keyboard, spending hours watching tutorials online and practicing until her fingers ached. She remembered the night everything changed, her fear and determination as she sat down at the Wilsons' grand piano, the faces of the guests as they realized what they were hearing, the feeling of finally being seen. The journey hadn't been a fairy tale. There had been hard work, tears, moments of doubt. There had been uncomfortable conversations about privilege and opportunity, about who gets noticed and who gets overlooked. There had been adjustments for everyone, for Olivia and Maria as their circumstances changed, for the Wilsons as they confronted their own preconceptions, for Patricia as she worked with a student whose background differed from her typical protégé. But there had also been joy, growth, and music. Always music. A final knock on the door. "5 minutes, Miss Johnson." Olivia took a deep breath, straightened her dress, and walked toward the stage. The hallway seemed to stretch forever, each step bringing her closer to a moment she had dreamed about for as long as she could remember. As she waited in the wings, she could see the hall filling with people. In the front row center, Thomas Reed, the conductor who had first recognized her potential, nodded encouragingly. In one of the boxes, she spotted her mother sitting beside Patricia Lee and the Wilsons, all of them watching expectantly. But there were other familiar faces, too. Rosa from the kitchen staff at the Wilson estate, teachers from her school, friends she had made at competitions, even some of the guests from that fateful birthday party who had continued to follow her progress. The stage manager gave her the signal. It was time. Olivia walked onto the Carnegie Hall stage, the lights warm on her skin. The audience applauded as she approached the magnificent Steinway at center stage. She took a moment to adjust the bench, then looked out at the sea of faces before her, so different from that first night when she had been asked to play for fun, when no one had expected anything remarkable. Now they were all here specifically to hear her play, to hear what she had to say through her music. She began with Bach, her fingers finding the familiar patterns, the complex harmonies that had fascinated her since childhood. From there, she moved to Chopin, then to the Debussy piece for her father, each note carrying her emotion to the audience. For her final piece, she played an original composition she had been working on for months, a piece that told her own story through music. It spoke of struggle and perseverance, of hidden talents and unexpected opportunities, of crossing boundaries and finding common ground. Most of all, it spoke of the transformative power of being truly seen and heard. As the final notes faded into silence, there was that magical moment of stillness that comes only after a deeply moving performance. The collective held breath before the release of applause. Then the audience rose to their feet, the sound of their appreciation filling the historic hall. Olivia stood and bowed, her eyes finding her mother in the box. Maria was crying openly now, her face radiant with pride and joy. Beside her, Richard and Eleanor Wilson applauded with genuine enthusiasm. They had learned as much from Olivia as she had gained from their support. Lessons about overlooked potential, about the arbitrary nature of privilege, about the talent and humanity that existed in people they had once barely noticed. As Olivia took her final bow and walked off stage, she knew this was just one milestone in a journey that would continue to unfold. There would be more concerts, more challenges, more growth ahead. But in this moment, she allowed herself to feel the simple joy of accomplishment, of having shown the world and herself exactly what she was capable of. Backstage, she was greeted by her mother's embrace, by Patricia's approving nod, by the Wilsons' congratulations. But the words that meant the most came from Maria, whispered in her ear as they hugged. "You played your truth tonight," her mother said, and the whole world heard it.